very much welcome. All right, today we have an incredible lineup of speakers who have a wealth of knowledge and expertise in today's topic. So let's meet our speakers. Our first speaker for today is Ms. Muyomoluwa Showande, who is an education and international development professional with experience that cuts across the areas of literacy and numeracy assessment, learning and teacher capacity development. She also has practical knowledge of the Global Proficiency Framework for reading and mathematics and policy linking methodology. She is also an ASA certified test developer, skilled in developing literacy and numeracy learning assessment tools and coordinating large-scale assessment, implementation, and data analysis and reporting. In addition, she has extensive knowledge and understanding of World Bank Teach, a classroom observation tool, experience designing learning curricula for remedial learning programs, and training teachers to understand the role assessment play in improving learning outcomes. Some of the projects she has worked on include Learn Nigeria, which is one of TEP's products, which is also a citizen-led assessment of literacy and numeracy skills of children in Nigeria, the UNESCO Institute of Statistics Learning Data Toolkit, which provides information and resources on methods and large assessment options that countries can use to ensure that their learning outcomes data is reported according to global standards. She has a career focus on the intersection of assessment, research, and education policy. You're welcome, Ms. Showande. Our next speaker for today is Mr. Daniel Ayala, who has years of experience in project management. He's a dynamic and results-driven professional with a strong focus on the education and humanitarian sectors. He has a proven track record in coordinating and implementing impactful projects that drive significant outcomes. His expertise include a broad range of competencies such as content development in foundational learning, providing nuanced technical support, and managing field operations. He is skilled in stakeholder engagement and strategic planning, which enables him to navigate complex project landscapes and deliver results that meet and exceed objectives. His commitment to driving meaningful improvement and achieving lasting change underscores his value as a key contributor to discussions on effective project implementation and strategic impact in the education and humanitarian sectors. You are very welcome, our speakers. You are very welcome, Mr. Daniel Ayala. We're going to have a really packed session and an engaging conversation. Please stay with us while we just embark on the conversation. Before we dive into engaging our speakers for today, we'll just run across the introduction of the webinar topic, where it talks about how assessment data plays a pivotal role in enhancing educational practices and improving student outcomes. Assessment data comes in various forms, primarily divided in formative and summative assessments. Formative assessments are conducted during learning process and provide immediate feedback to both teachers and students. Examples include quizzes, classroom discussions rather, and ongoing observations. Summative assessments, however, occur at the end of an instructional period, such as final exams, standardized tests, and end of term projects, and they evaluate student learning against set benchmarks. Now, to effectively use assessment data, educators must develop data literacy skills, and this involves understanding the different data sources, recognizing patterns and trends, and making informed decisions based on data insights. Quantitative data, which includes numeric scores and statistical measures, can be analyzed to identify overall performance and specific areas of need. However, qualitative data such as written feedback and student reflections provide deeper insights into student understanding and learning processes. Using this assessment data, we then tailor instructional strategies as it is essential for meeting the diverse needs of students. Differentiated instructions instruction, which includes creating flexible groups, providing scaffolded support, and designing personalized learning paths, ensures that teaching is responsive to individual student profiles. Regular data analysis, however, helps educators identify the strengths and weaknesses of the students and set specific and measurable goals and adjust lesson plans accordingly. Now, the primary goal of this webinar is to empower African educators to harness the power of assessment data to inform their teaching strategies and address the diverse needs of their students. By adopting data-driven approaches, educators can make informed decisions that lead to improved student outcomes, thus contributing to the overarching goals of educational excellence and equity across the continent. Now to our question, Ms. Shawande, if you will, how best do you think assessment data can influence overall student growth and learning development?
Thank you very much, first of all, Mufi, for the introduction. It's an honor to be speaking at this month's edition of TEPS monthly webinars. And just to go right straight to your question, so how best do I think that assessment can be used to inform student growth? First of all, assessments help us to help teachers or educators to actually monitor students' progress. Where what assessments do is like sort of like to put a structure to being able to say that this is where students were at the beginning of, for example, maybe at the beginning of a school term, and at the end of that school term, um, based on assessments that would also be conducted, the teacher is able to know that these students have improved on their academic performances. So what assessments do is help us to monitor progress, actually, to track the learning from day one, from the very beginning of the timeline of instruction to the very end, and to help the teachers also know if they have achieved, their goal, the goals that they have set, the learning goals they have set for the children. And assessments also help to target instruction. So when you carry out assessments, for instance, assessment for learning, which is your formative assessments, you carry that out, and based on the results of those assessments, the educator or teacher is able to then tailor the instruction to the student based on the learning gaps that have been identified um, through the assessment results that were generated. So basically, what assessments do is to help teachers to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the students. And based on those strengths and weaknesses, the teacher is then able to customize instructions such that at the end of the day, the students would have achieved or acquired the specific knowledge and skills that they are meant to have acquired based on the overall goal for teaching. And also assessments help to improve student growth by looking at the curriculum, for instance, and the content of the curriculum. So when you're setting a curriculum content, whether just at the classroom level, before the students are being taught, there's an assumption that this is what is going to be taught. This is what the students should have learned after a certain period of time. But after carrying out the assessments and looking at the assessment data, the teacher can then look at the curriculum and look at the assessment data, or look at the trends or patterns that have been identified from that assessment, from the assessment results, and see whether the curriculum needs to be fine-tuned or if it needs to be left the way it is. So the idea is at the end of the day that student growth, when you monitor student growth, you are able to see whether they are just repeating it again, they are achieving or acquiring the skills that and knowledge that they are meant to acquire at that stage that the students are in, and not necessarily that they are acquiring skills that are maybe above their learning level at that point in time or way below their learning levels. So that would be my
Thank you
contribution for now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Showande. From what I picked from your contribution, I can tell the very crucial importance of assessment data to the overall student growth and development, which is very crucial. You need to understand that the students are actually getting the benefit of every instruction or every curriculum being taught or being passed across. So in light of that, Mr. Ayala, what would you say is your analysis in the general use of this assessment data or to inform instruction on the African scale? Because we know the challenges we are facing in the Nigerian context. What would be your analysis of how we use this assessment data on the African scale?
Thank you, Mufi, for this question, and it is an honor to be here also. I would say the use of assessment data in Africa is something that has great potential, I would say, but there will be, due to systemic challenges and I would say limited resources and different levels of data literacy among educators, and also inconsistency of data practices. This promising initiative of awareness for data-driven instructions is not as effectively used as it should be. I would say, using from my experience from implementation of projects or teacher development, we have been to classes where teachers usually, as customs, do assess their pupils. But these assessments have not really been turned into instructions. The assessments has just been done for like ticking the boxes, completing tasks or the curriculum according to stipulated rules in the classes. So what we do when we go to schools, we try to make sure the teachers use these assessments consciously to tailor their instructions, because when assessment is done and the instructions are not changed from the feedback gotten from this assessment, it would not be that effective to help children learn. So what we do when we go to project sites, we do teacher training, we try to make teachers have this consciousness of using assessment data to inform their instruction. I know in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world where the education level is more developed and there are assessment strategies and technology that have been infused to help people learn better. But in Africa, we still have a gap to fill. I'll say we're kind of lagging behind, and it's something that should be something that we should say and canvas for more inputs, so as to make teachers use instructions and use the data gotten from their classes to help children learn better. Like as Moyo has mentioned, when these assessments are being gotten and the data is being used to inform instruction, kids or children in their various classes will learn better and have improved learning outcomes. So this is my take.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayala. It's actually quite spot on, because when we look at the world on a large scale, generally the world has left us behind when it comes to utilizing data-driven tools, that make our everyday life seamless. So we are just picking up on the importance of the use of data, and most especially in the educational context. So back to you, what would you say are the key components of creating a data-driven culture in our schools today? Because when a culture is established, it now becomes something that is part of our everyday life, and also getting stakeholders like parents and guardians involved in understanding and supporting their child's assessment data.
Hi,
Sorry,
Mufi.
yes.
Yes, sorry, I didn't get the question.
Okay, I said, what would you say are the key components of creating a data-driven culture in our schools today? I specifically spoke about how when a culture becomes part of our everyday life, and also getting stakeholders involved, like our parents, our guardians, communities involved in understanding and supporting the child's assessment data. What would you say are the key components?
Okay, supporting the child, building a data-driven culture among the school system and parents. I would say it's first you need to carry out data literacy training so as to help educators understand the kinds of data and how to turn this data to help build upon instruction. Because data on itself, it's raw facts that is not usable until it has been changed or transformed into information. That's the information giving the instruction a change relating to the data, making inferences from this data. So it is vital to have a teacher training or train educators on how to use this data to inform instruction, to change the way they have been teaching, to take the child or children in their various classes to where they should be. Also, the community of practice for instructors can never be overemphasized, because in these communities where educators learn and build upon themselves to improve upon what they've learned, one teacher from another class will help from the experience he or she has gotten from a class to modify his instruction. And when this kind of community of practice have been initiated, other teachers learn using their experience, leveraging on where these other teachers have improved to improve upon their various classes. So these are steps to help make this data usable in various contexts you have mentioned.
All right. I was also speaking to how this how we can turn the use of data into something that becomes a culture of an everyday life, and how we can also get our parents and our guardians on board the idea, because it takes, like it says, it takes a whole village to train a child. So it's not just about what the government does or what the private sector does or what private partnerships do in this regard, but it's also the key roles these informal stakeholders relating to our parents and the community, and how their role is in influencing the culture of using assessment data.
Okay, so if you are talking about the communities and parents, how they influence using data. So I would say the starting point would be relating to the Parents Teachers Association, the school interface with the community and parents. So the objectives of what kids are supposed to learn has to be communicated to the parents, because the school doesn't stand on its own. Parents do have a lot of work to do, helping molding the children at home or molding the children in the community, while the school does its own part. So together in the whole, when parents and the community of schools work together, they form like an alliance to build children, helping them at home or in their communities as the school does their own part. So parents need to understand and understand how the progress of their children is in school, when the school communicates progress to the parents or to the community members. So with this level of progress, the parents or the community can have their own input to build upon what the school has been doing for the while, then help the children learn in their houses. So with the school and with the parents or the communities, they build like a solid learning position for the children.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ayala. Now over to you, Ms. Showande. There are a lot of things the teachers and educators have to do, like they have a lot to do in their role regarding designing data-driven lesson plans. So how do you think they can achieve this to address the diverse needs of their students?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So the first thing is to start with collective comprehensive data. So collective comprehensive data in the classroom.
Hello, Ms. Showande, are you there with us?
Because at this stage, it's typically not like high stakes
Oh, I'm sorry, we lost you for a while.
assessments where they can't be maybe promoted. Oh, sorry, wait, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay,
can hear you
sorry,
now.
I thought. Yes, so if they write the West African School Certificate Examination, it determines whether they're able to get into university. It's not that type of assessment. It's just basically an assessment that is not supposed to, how would I say it, penalize students, but it's supposed to help at the end of the day, the students improve their learning. So the first thing is collecting comprehensive data, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a test, the way you have your questions. It could be quizzes, it could be your homework, or it could be classwork. It could be just observing the students. And from that, when you record the data that you're collecting through the observation, through the homework or the classwork or through the quizzes, the teacher can then identify patterns. So the teacher can identify patterns across students, across a group of students, or identify patterns with individual students. So across a group of students could be, if you notice that the easiest way to just say it is maybe you have addition. You are trying to create a lesson plan, for instance, to ensure that children are able to, add or carry out addition operations. And we know that if we're familiar, there's the simple 1-digit addition, there's the 2 digits, there's the one where what we would call in layman's term, carryover, and things like that, or the one that involves 4-digit numbers. So basically, you can, maybe when you carry out your assessment, you see that there's a particular concept that most of the students are still struggling with when it comes to addition. So that's like identifying a pattern. Or you notice that a certain student over time, so you can't just use one assessment to, and a singular assessment, it might not be enough to be able to say the data that you've generated from it, to be able to say this is what you want to run with. But carrying out 2, 3, 4 over a period of time helps to then compare. You are able to compare the results, and you can identify students that when you've carried out all the 4 assessments, there are certain students that still struggle. Or maybe a group of students are actually struggling. So it might be struggling with the same concept. So it might be maybe they do not understand how they have been taught, or maybe there's how you have soft skills. So when you're trying to add, there are certain skills that make up the ability to add numbers. So it could even be an issue with, for instance, number recognition, or an issue with place value, that in carrying out those assessments, you are able to then see and ask what is actually, you are able to look at the trends, seek to understand the reasons behind student performance. So it's not just to also understand reasons behind student performance in terms of students that are not doing well, but also students that are doing well, so that you are asking, okay, students that are doing well, what is the factor that is responsible for these students doing well? And how can those factors be considered when it actually comes to those who are not doing well? So first thing I said is your comprehensive assessment, carry out comprehensive assessments. Also carry out those assessments in a way that children don't feel petrified by the thought of assessments. Because if memory serves me well, when I was younger in school, the idea of an assessment just used to stress me out, and that can actually impact how students perform. But if you assure the students that it's not to penalize you, it's not to put you in a place of competition or to compare you to other students, so that to say one student is better than another student is better than you, it's to just know where your children are at when it comes to learning. So you carry out those comprehensive assessments, you collect the data, you look at the patterns or trends, and simple even Excel sheets can help you to develop charts, bar charts, pie charts, whatever it is, line charts, to just see students' growth or students' decline, if I may say, and then seeking to understand. So not just seeing data as something to contribute to the child's academic grade, but something to digging deep, not just seeing a child has a certain score. Don't just take the data as they had this. Okay, so some children scored 80%, for instance. So what does 80% mean? What does 70% mean? What does 40% mean? So really digging deep and not just taking data scores at the surface level. Once that is done, that would then help the teachers to then say, how do we develop lesson plans that can actually meet the needs and capture all the students that are being taught? So because as I was talking about addition, your instruction should also be differentiated. So the lesson plan should reflect, the content should reflect differentiated instruction, such that you are factoring in the learning abilities of the students. Even if you are trying to teach addition of a certain number of digits, but within that group of those group of students, you will still find the ones that might be struggling a bit, and you don't now put them aside and focus on only the ones that very quickly they're able to answer all your questions correctly. So when this is done, this then helps to define, to work on lesson plans. And this is an iterative process where it's not a process where you do it once and for all. It's continuous. So if you've done an assessment now, you create your lesson plan, you have to keep assessing the students over time, and based on your assessment, you keep refining the lesson plan, and at the end of the day, to ultimately ensure that you are achieving the learning goal. So that would be my
Very much.
contribution.
Thank you very much. I completely share your sentiment, because there's so many things that the teachers have to consider, or actually have to look into. Like, there are different types of learning experiences students have. There's auditory, visual, and aesthetic. All these things speak to the different needs of the students and how they also learn, and how using assessments to collect this data will inform your different lessons, and how to even approach those lessons. So what you're saying is very, very critical, and I completely agree, with your sentiments. I'm completely on board. However, teachers are the ones who are responsible for delivering or taking this assessment. And I just attended a conference last week in regards to education, and a lot of teachers made complaints about teacher capacity development and how it is very deficient. And that is just on the on the Lagos state scale, and maybe a sub-Saharan Africa state. But how can we help? How can educators develop data literacy skills to better interpret and utilize this assessment data? Because all that you said are very important. But at the end of the day, when these teachers are incapacitated to do these assessments and to also interpret and utilize them, the work becomes futile. So how can they develop this skill?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, I mean, the first things first, professional development. You have to, as a teacher, be somebody that is constantly looking to improve yourself as a teacher. So, and there are so many, there are online courses now. If there isn't, if the school that a teacher is teaching with, or if the government, if maybe the government in that particular state hasn't really provided much opportunities in form of professional development when it comes to data literacy, their online there are websites now. You have even Coursera. There are free courses that you can just Google assessment for learning or assessment for instruction in the classroom. Google will give you a list of, websites where you can sign up for those courses. For some of the courses, maybe you might need to pay some money to get the certificate. But some of them, if you're not interested in getting your certificate or you don't have the means at that point in time, you can just take the courses. So there's Class Central, there's Coursera, there's even YouTube. There are YouTube videos. Another thing is also joining a network and not limiting oneself to Nigeria, because we know the world is now a lot smaller. It's a global village. So just join networks. LinkedIn is a very good tool. Is a very good tool in terms of meeting people. So it can be as simple as just typing in assessment for learner. LinkedIn will always come up with something. Following the right people. If you know that there are people that are really into assessment, following them on LinkedIn. People these days are very open to even connecting and having brief chats. So you don't need to know somebody before reaching out to the person to say, I'm looking to improve my data literacy skills as a teacher, and I can see your profile. I see the work that you have done. Do you mind a quick, 15 minutes chat to just sort of tell me about your journey and what are the things I should look out for? Because sometimes on your own, you might be looking out for those platforms, but there's nothing like having somebody, show you the ropes and telling you this is the exact platform. I've tried this platform before, you can also try it out. And yeah, if there is no network that you can see around you, you can start your own network of enthusiastic teachers as well. And people, they may not necessarily have the skill sets, but they are passionate and have the drive to actually improve the data literacy skills. And practice. You cannot, if no matter how many, no matter the number of courses you take, if you are not practicing individually, you don't become better. So even if one is teaching in a school where the assessment is majorly just focused on, let us just the number of children that are getting A's for WAEC, for instance. That's all the school cares about. Or let's know the number of students, let's know if our students can do well at the cowbell mathematics competition, for example. And they're not necessarily focused on, that granular level where, you're just trying to improve the skills of children, where it has nothing to do with whether they are being promoted or whether they are not being promoted. you can do it on your own as a teacher. Just look at your students' assignments and tests, Excel sheets, there's Google Sheets, write out the scores. There are videos on how to use Excel. I think Excel even has some form of tutorials. If you go on Excel, there are tutorials on how to do a pivot table or something, or how to do a line chart, how to, visualize data that you're collecting. So for me, these are some of the examples of ways that teachers can improve their data literacy skills.
Thank you very much, Ms. Showande, and I can see a lot of our attendees really engaging in the conversation. Also, we actually appreciate your contributions, and if you also have questions, I can already see a couple of questions in the Q&A box. Please keep them coming in, but we will handle each question after the session for the speakers. I completely agree with you regarding the developing 21st century skills. You can't give what you don't have, and a lot of these teachers. I grew up in a family of teachers, and the bulk of the capacity development were personalized, not on a platform where they actually got, the opportunity to have that training. So it comes from the angle. She has spoken down to the granular level of how teachers can get these skills, and even speaking to LinkedIn, a lot of teachers aren't actually on LinkedIn. So how do you connect with this network? This is how you can actually develop the skills. So speaking to Mr. Ayala, what would you say are some of the best practices for setting and achieving personalized learning goals based on assessment data? So you've done assessment, you've gotten your data. So what would you say are the best practices for setting, and achieving personalized learning goals?
Okay, thank you, Mofi, for this question. For best practices for achieving personalized goal, I would say assessments, you have to use assessments that are set for SMART. That's for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, that has time-bound goals. So you regularly review these assessments to adjust goals, and based on your data that you have gathered, you set the process of increasing engagement for children. Like what we do when we, as an example, I would say, first off, when we assess, we have like a form of a diagnostic assessment where we assess learners to understand where they fit in. Prior to that, we already established some learning goals we already intend to assess. So when you have these learning goals, you assess to find out if the learners are competent enough to fit in these goals that you have set. Then when we do the assessment, we group these learners. Now, this is, we're trying to be specific to measure what these learners know. So when we find out where the learners are at, we kind of group them in these various learning categories so as to provide personalized or differentiated instructions to them depending on what they have achieved. This helps in learning because the children are reached at the places where they are, the levels where they are, like the teaching at the right methodology, or maybe the CAMAL, the combined activities for maximized learning, where you have specific objectives you intend to achieve. You assess the learners, then you group them in these particular groups so as to provide level appropriate methodologies to help them improve and learn better. I would also say regular monitoring of progress is vital, because monitoring the levels where the learners are at helps you to understand and change your instructions. Then you move to the next level to see, yes, have these objectives been met? Let's not just stay here. Let's move to the next level. Then you already set another objectives to gauge the learner understanding. Then once those other objectives are met, you move. If the objectives are not met how expected, you modify the instruction to fit and help the children learn better. So I would say these are best practices you put into achieving personalized learning goals when you use assessments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayala. Another thing that just came to mind is actually how we sort of shift responsibility to to the teachers. However, there's a systemic problem or a systemic gap in knowing if the system actually allows the teachers to be digital literate, or if they are even there's a word here, if they even have basic knowledge of assessments about how to use this assessment and how to implement, the use of this assessment. We need to actually think about these things, because it's actually a systemic problem. And if you're not given a platform for which you use the knowledge you've already acquired, it is a challenge. So what do we think are some of, speaking to Ms. Shwande now, some of the systemic challenges that teachers face, when trying to use assessment data, and if these systems even create a platform for them to actually use this assessment?
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, a major challenge, particularly in this part of the world, is just still trying to shift the mindset, not necessarily even the teacher. So, for instance, if a teacher has become more aware as an individual of the importance of assessment to improve, instruction or for learning, but the teacher is teaching in a school where the school system is still very much focused on, let's know how many people got A's so if I'm a geography teacher, for instance, I'm just saying, so how many students got A's this session? As for instance, Mrs. Mofinyo Ojo is a teacher, and she's a geography teacher. Some schools reward the teachers based on based on the number of A's that the students that are taking that subject score at the end of a session. So if you are teaching in a school like that, it's a bit of a struggle to use whatever assessment data, because the school is just focused on being able to, you have schools these days that they're very particular about, how they want to be able to see when they're trying to advertise their schools to, prospective parents of students. They want to be able to say, this is the average, score that our children get in this particular subject. Our children are very good in this subject, maybe mathematics, English. And the focus is usually on that. The focus is not individualized, if what I'm saying makes sense. The focus is more about, the image, the academic image that the school is trying to portray to others. And so the teacher might be struggling. That's one of the major challenges where, as Daniel mentioned initially, where in a number of schools, it's still about, at the end of the term, when you are even doing continuous assessments. When I was younger, I thought that continuous assessments were just to, that when you're doing the continuous assessments, the scores will, at the end of the day, contribute to your overall score. So if you're in a school where that is all that is happening, where you don't even have room for even saying, I'm just trying to assess the students to know whether I can tweak my lesson instruction or my style of teaching, it will be a struggle because the teacher actually means well, but the school system doesn't allow. The second thing is also that it's time consuming. So maybe even it's still time ties down to the school actually leaving some form of allowance for teachers to actually, practice this assessment for learning. In the sense that if there's a target that the school needs to meet, if there's a goal or target that the school has communicated to the teachers at the beginning of the session or at the beginning of the term, and most times the teachers, when they know that their reward is tied to how they perform, they would be more focused on performing well to meet the indicators that the school has set, the performance indicators that the school has set. And so they're not giving room to practice, or they don't even have the time, because all of the time would be towards, let us meet these performance indicators at the end of the school year. And so it's time consuming. Most teachers will actually, it's the best way to explain it is, let me give an example of sometimes if you went to a Nigerian university, there was this joke about, it's not about whether you know something, it's about passing. However way you choose to pass, it's not about understanding. If you have a lecturer, for instance, that all the lecturer cares about is just give it to me. When I ask you questions, it is the way I have stated it in the handouts or the lessons. That's how I want you to give it to me. It doesn't matter whether you understand. You can understand and understand the wrong thing and still not pass the exam. But yet you have students that they don't really care about understanding. They already know this lecturer, it is as he has given you, as he has taught you, word for word, that's how he wants you to provide the answers. I don't know if that explains it. So basically, you would have teachers that would then be like, I'm going to pander, like the school employed me. So I know, yes, assessment for learning is important. There are benefits to it, but I am going to pander to what the school wants. So this then goes to say maybe not just teachers need to improve or on their practice of assessment for learning, but we also need schools to buy into the importance of assessment for learning. Because if you don't have school leaders or school systems that actually buy in, then there's a problem. So for now, those are the things that for me, that's a major issue, like a mindset shift from penalizing students. You pass, you did not pass, either pass or fail. From shifting that mindset to, I'm assessing you not to penalize you or not to make you feel bad for not doing well, but to help you at the end of the day improve as a student. And there's also parents as well, because there are parents that all they want to know is, did you do, what score did you get? They don't really care about the details. What score did my child get? And so sometimes the school is trying to, teachers are trying their best, but the parents also are not on board, or if the parents are complaining and are heavily involved in the, parents teachers association, it sort of impedes, whatever progress that teachers can have when it comes to assessment for learning in schools. So
thank you very much for everything you've said. It's actually a very crucial thing, and it's a systemic challenge where we can tell that teachers need to be reintroduced or reoriented on the purpose of assessment and the effects of assessment, a change of mentality of these teachers, and also the commitment to the government to seeing that it's not just about the students passing per se, but that they're understanding. And that is where even bridging the demands of the industry and the supply of what the education institutions are producing. Because at the end of the day, the industry comes out to complain that they are not getting what they want. There are jobs out there, but they are not graduates who can meet the demands of those industries. And this is where assessment comes in bridging that gap. And I can see a lot of engagement in the chat box. It is quite massive, and I am quite excited about the engagement from Utibe, from Salisu, from Joe Arogunyo. I apologize if that was pronounced wrongly. So right now we're going to delve into the Q&A because there are quite a couple and I want us to deal with them. From Sylvester Ugunwa, are there tools that educators can deploy for data analysis of assessment like other corporate organizations other than the usual tests and end of term report sheet? Please, Mr. Ayala, please go ahead. Hello, Mr.
Yes.
Ayala.
Yeah, you mentioned tools. You said tools
Are there
for...
tools that educators can deploy for data analysis of assessments like other corporate organizations other than the usual tests and end of term report sheets?
If you're talking about tools for that can be used for assessment, you can have personalized tools like you can have like a learning management system where you can use to track pupils' learning data.
Okay.
And most online, most web apps do have it at the back end, or even you can access those back ends to see learning progress for learners. When designing apps per se, we have one that's not fully operational though. But when it is, we communicate this to the public to start with. So, but learning apps can be modified to have like a learning management system where you track. You can have an easy Excel sheet to track progress that calculates and puts it in a kind of a graph or maybe some form of display to understand more. The essence of using data for informing instruction is to look at this data, to have that prior training first, the basic training, if you may, have that basic training, then understand the data, looking at your inputs and seeing, have there been an upward or a downward trend? Where have these trends been using the objectives, what you intend to achieve? Then you will know where the kinds of pedagogies you need to impute for learners so as to bring them up to speed or to remediate or improve upon their learning. So these are ways you can use to track and to understand the data for using a learning management system. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I like a question here from Adesunloye Adeola. It talks about how if there is a report on assessment data on terminal exams, that helps to inform curriculum development at the state level and at the local level. Ms. Shoande, would you like to speak to that, please?
Yeah, definitely there are reports. I mean, even if we think about the last, is it UTME exam, that there was this uproar about the performance being very low. So from my knowledge or understanding, I know that the government doesn't joke with reports on exams like UTME, the West African School Certificate Examination. At least that West African School Certificate Examination is, supposed to show that students have learned the skills that they should learn by the time they are completing secondary school. So there are definitely reports, they are very particular about those reports that show, how students are performing across different regions, in Nigeria. And I want to believe that those reports actually inform how they design, the curriculum. I also understand that I'm not sure about the number of how frequent they, redesign the syllabus, but I'm familiar with the fact that we design the syllabus every few years. I'm just not sure if it's every 4 years at the moment, but it's you know it's refined or redesigned every few years. And I believe that it's based on the reports that they get, and they factor in, the results of students.
Thank you very much. Speaking to the curriculum development, it was part of our conversation at our last webinar, and we spoke to how far wide the tweaking and editing of the curriculum is in adjusting to the present needs of students and the current demands of the 21st century. Well, that's an aside. We are speaking about assessment data today. It's in alignment. But today we want to ask, Adesunloye wants to ask how school admins and leaders are currently using data. It's actually a very good question for today. How are these schools using the data? Are there schools that we know today that we can say are leaders in data-informed practices? Mr. Ayala, I know that you've had some hands-on experience in dealing with different states and schools, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, and how they use assessment. So would you say there are schools, both in Nigeria and in the African scale, you believe use leaders in the data-informed practices?
Okay, thank you again, Mofi, for the question. I'll say schools, administrators and leaders, they use data, but not as much as they should. The uses of this data.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, Mofi, can you hear me?
Hello, can we hear Mr. Ayala, please?
Can you hear me, Mofi?
Yes, we can hear you now. Can hear you.
Okay, okay. So I say schools and administrators or leaders of schools, they use data, but not as much as they should. The use of data is, it helps, or it is used for gathering information on teacher trainings, depending again on the kinds of system they may have developed in their various admin operations. So they may have a system where they track teacher performances. Then this will be from a feed of where teachers have their own input system, where they input into the main system where the admins can track performances, can track timings, can track how their class or how learner progress in their class. This informs for professional development trainings or for other developments for the teacher. So this is like a major way where data, where a kind of a system is used by admin or school leaders to improve upon data usage in their particular schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayala. You're very, very spot on in that response, and a lot of engagement in the chat box are speaking to how you can use AI tools, how there are different tools and approaches and practices that these schools can actually bring on board for to help their assessment data. Now, I can see here is an anonymous attendee, however, speaking to, he understands or she understands the role of teachers, which we've put a lot of priority on today. But how can researchers or school administrators play the role in contributing to the effective use of assessment data? Ms. Shoande, please.
Okay.
How education, other education stakeholders, basically.
Okay, so when it comes to researchers and contributing to contributing to the effective use of assessment data, I think the first way as a researcher is to actually carry out research that actually tells us the actual state of assessment data literacy, for instance, in Nigeria. So there's the literature on assessment data literacy in Nigeria and Africa is a bit limited. So it's when you've been able to research and actually publish your results and actually let people know that there's a problem. When you've been able to establish, not just, we all know that there's a challenge, like we know by just experience or by observing. So, but it's one thing, you can't draw conclusions, for instance. You can't, if you are looking to get support of the government, for instance, the buy-in of the government or key decision makers when it comes to education, you cannot just draw conclusions based on observation. What is the data that actually backs what you are trying to say? So this is where education researchers can come in by contributing to the existing literature about where teachers are at, where schools are at when it comes to assessment data literacy. So I think the aim of that is to, get the data from that research to generate awareness, to advocate for more resources, for instance, or to advocate for allocation of, more resources, more financial resources. So when you're talking about professional development for teachers, usually, if I'm correct, the focus a lot of times is not, there's minimal focus on assessment for instruction, assessment for learning. There might be other areas of focus that, the government, chooses to prioritize. But when you carry out research and you provide that data to back what you're saying, you are able to create awareness and hopefully advocate for more support from key decision makers and other stakeholders. For instance, there are people that are into EdTech, for instance. A way to actually contribute is, setting up EdTech platforms that are not just, there are a lot of EdTech platforms that, a lot of them sprang up during COVID, to teach, teach children online, to teach students online, or to teach students that are not necessarily in a classroom, and which is great. But we need more EdTech platforms that automate, for instance, that can automate classroom, assessment. And I know there are a couple globally. There's Google Forms, Google Classrooms, and all of those things, which is great. But we need the kind of tools that are contextual, that look at our challenges, look at the challenges that schools are facing when it comes to using assessment data to improve students' growth, and sort of designing or creating those platforms that, yes, are globally effective, but also capture the uniqueness of the Nigerian education system. Also, if there are some people who all they just do is fund education projects. So if you are a stakeholder that is open to funding projects that are related to education, how about funding professional development workshops, that can help teachers to improve their data literacy when it comes to assessment? How about, there's high network people that actually have people, not just in Nigeria, across the globe, that are in their networks, and not just, I know this person, people that when they can call a group of people to a room and get them to buy into a project. How about leveraging on those networks and actually saying there's a problem with, or we need to improve the assessment data literacy in Nigeria, and looking to just get investors, looking to just get people to buy in and support. So those are some of my answers to that question.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shuande. We're We're beginning to wind down the session, and I thank everyone for their insightful conversation and contribution. I can see here the final question which I've taken for today says, how can we adopt the understanding of audiovisual aids equipment for instruction and assessment, and how can okay, that's it. Mr. Ayala, please go ahead.
Sorry, Mofin, I didn't get the question. You said how can
we adopt the understanding of audiovisual aids equipment for instruction and assessment?
Okay. Audiovisual aids for assessments. Okay, I would say audiovisual aids. Learners there are learners that learn in different ways. Some that audios will be auditory learners or visual learners are more drawn to presentations that are more audio, or for visual that are more visual. So in respect to the question, learners' assessment can be done using these devices, maybe probably audio or visual, when the educator's objectives on students' learning is tailored towards audio or towards visual. You can have an example where you say, okay, you have an assessment. Assessment can be formative or summative. In this case, we're talking about mainly formative, since it is supposed to inform, since it's instant and it's supposed to inform instruction. So you can have like an audio feedback, or maybe an audio learning played, where you say, can you make the sound for apple? Then in turn, the learners are supposed to make those learning sounds for you to gauge and understand that, yes, they are on track. We have Jolly Phonics is kind of an example where is audio visual, where you have videos play on sounds and how to attach sounds to alphabet names, which is like a base of learning how to understand text, or graphemes to help on learning. So once you have this kind of either audio or visual, in like an example, let's say Jolly Phonics. So the feedback you get informs your data on the instruction you need to change and observe if children are learning. It forms your assessment then. So when you have this in your class and you say, can you repeat after what is being said on screen, or if it is from an audio device where there's no visual connected to it. So the feedback you get the process forms like your assessment. You are trying to find out if learners understand or can relate to what is being said or viewed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ayala. I can see here from Olatunji Babatunde, who is saying, I hope the recorded version of the webinar will be made available to us. Absolutely. Within the next 24 to 48 hours, you can access this recording on YouTube. Just search for the webinar topic and then you have access to it. Absolutely, it's going to be made available for everyone to go back and always view. We thank you. I want to just thank our speakers, Ms. Moyomoluwa Shuande and Mr. Daniel Ayala, and for everyone who has joined us this far. Thank you very much for a very engaging conversation. Over to you, Zena.
Hello, Mofin. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been such an insightful session, and I really want to appreciate everyone for contributing to making this conversation truly insightful. If you know you learned a thing or two and you had so much fun today, please drop a fire emoji or your favorite emoji for our panelists. This is your way of telling them thank you for such an insightful conversation. I'm looking forward to your responses in the chat box. Drop a fire emoji or your favorite emoji for us. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I see you all. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to also specially appreciate our lead presenter and our panelists for a really insightful discussion today. I would also like to acknowledge the members of the press who have joined us today. Thank you so much for being here. Our next webinar would be grand, following a series called EdMeet. As I mentioned earlier, at the start of the webinar, EdMeet series is a bridge builder event where the spotlight is shown on the pivotal roles that education plays in the attainment of sustainable development goals. And this will be the third edition of EdMeet, called EdMeet Climate Change. And the theme is titled Creating a Sustainable Future for Children on Earth. My apologies, I'll take that again. And the theme is titled Creating a Sustainable Future for Children on Earth, and it is scheduled to hold on the 28th of August. If you're excited about this, please, you can follow us on all of our social media platforms and to learn more about this upcoming event. We are at TEP Center on YouTube, and TEP Center on Twitter, and TEP Center on Instagram, across all media platforms. If you also like to have more information, you can check out our website, which is www.tepcenter.com, or email us at info@tepcenter.com. You can also join our community so that you can stay subscribed to our mailing list. The link would be in the chat box to get to know when our next webinar would be coming up and all of our other exciting events. We'd also like to hear your thoughts, your feedback. At TEP Center, we value your thoughts, we value your opinions, we value your suggestions, and we'd like to hear from you. So please click on the link in the chat box to share your feedback with us so that we can improve the quality of our webinar and discussion to meet pressing topics in the educational sector. I'm super delighted and glad that you were able to join us today. And I hope to see you next month, same time, same place. And bye for now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.